Hello and welcome to day 8 of Bondcember. My name is Tom.
I'm Joe.
Well, we're back in an actual sensible, a film made by people,
Yes.
rather than
Well,
if you've not
Casino Royale
listened.
was made by people, but it was made by people who should have known better. And now we're back to, journeymen who get like hundreds of or millions of dollars and all the toys.
Yeah. So this is the last. Well, technically, it's the penultimate Sean Connery film because this is where things start getting a little bit weird because Sean Connery basically quits at the end of You Only Live Twice, and as we'll go on to speak tomorrow, we again get on Her Majesty's Secret Service, and Bond will then return. Then Sean Connery comes back in Diamonds Are Forever. So this is sort of like almost a. It feels very much like a send-off for Bond as a character, because you basically get, Bond goes to Japan, Bond meets, essentially finally comes face to face with Blofeld, and someone let Roald Dahl do a screenplay.
Yeah. Although, interesting story between Ian Fleming and Roald Dahl. They were a part of a group of spies that the British were using on Americans. And it was this big group of people. Noel Coward was a part of it. And Ian Fleming, Roald Dahl, and the guy who was the head of it is the guy that Ian Fleming based the character of James Bond off of. So that's how they knew each other. And what it was they were going to convince the U.S. to go to World War II, because even after Pearl Harbor, they weren't fully invested in World War II. Like, they did a few activities in the Pacific Theater, and then like, this war is hard. I mean, we didn't win it right away. So they had to convince like a lot of the opinion leaders and, Congress people. So a lot of it involved Roald Dahl having a lot of sex.
Yeah.
So that was, I mean, he was in with like a publisher, but there was a female senator who was in with apparently the editor of Time magazine, who was very isolationist, and apparently she was a sex fiend, and like he had to call Great Britain, and it's just like, she wants it all day, every day. I gotta get out of here. This is too much. Nope, Queen and Country rolled. So that kind of explains why Roald Dahl would be here.
Because where else would he be? Dahl would later go on to adapt another Fleming novel, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang,
which we will not get into, and it is its own pile of issues. But that is not our train wreck. We are back here at You Only Live Twice, which is not a train wreck, but it has not aged well.
No. So in this film, Bond goes to Japan, and basically Bond engages in a lot of in sort of cultural things on his hunt for Blofeld, who has basically shored himself up in a volcano, because of course he has.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first film where we actually finally come face to face with Blofeld, who is played by Donald Pleasance. Who
is a wonderful screen presence. He just unfortunately shows up in a lot of the wrong films.
Yeah. And obviously Blofeld has been hinted pretty much in every Bond film since From Russia with Love, but this is the first time we actually see Blofeld in the flesh, and sort of, rather than a stand-in or anything else. And it's a sort of, and the problem with this film, I feel, is it's how do we say this? It is aged badly in its representation of Japan. It has aged badly in its representation of women.
And since this is the big thing for like how people got introduced to culture in Japan, well, Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, it's
Yeah, and yet in some
we,
places it's really like impressively detailed. I mean, there is a full sumo match in this film. There is a full Japan which lasts several minutes, a full Japanese style wedding in which
hmm
Bond becomes married to Kissy Suzuki because Fleming cannot name
yeah,
female characters to save his life.
yeah.
um, yeah, so, and then it has ninjas because of course it does.
Oh, of course it does. And like James Bond marries into a family of ninjas, and that's who is going to help him.
Hmm.
Um,
And yet it's also like this was a co-production with a really one of the big Japanese studios, Toho, who probably most Western
yeah,
audiences will remember for making the Godzilla films, a lot of Kira Kurosawa's films. They are pretty much one of the really big Japanese studios, and they really did sort of basically almost co-helm this film because you end up
yeah.
with
Sorry.
pretty much three or four key Toho talents, as you know, obviously of the English of those who could speak English, as fairly major stars in this.
Yeah, because you have like you said you recognized the person who played uh, Tiger Tanaka,
Yeah,
Tetsuro Tanba. Yeah, it's like I looked at his cast list and it's like, what would you have recognized him? But it was just like that is a gigantic list of things.
yeah. I mean, this is the
And I mean, to the movie's credit, like a good amount of the cast is Japanese, which would not always be a thing where you would cast like actual people, or if you did, you would just have like, the token minority,
yeah.
or they would be very obviously the villains, like the Three Blind Mice and Doctor No. But this they're in Japan, and like we will find out when Sean Connery is disguising himself as a Japanese man, it is very very hard to fake, Asian with British actors.
Yeah, we were not kidding when we said this film does not age well in that respect. It's
No.
um Bond basically goes yellow face, and
Yeah.
it's like it's kind of painful to sort of go, oh god, really,
Yeah.
really sure you looked at this and went, yeah, that'll fly.
And then there's the line by Tiger Tanaka. It's like in Japan, men come first and women come second, and then that obviously teed up the famous Austin Powers line. Well, sometimes not at all.
Yeah, and I feel this is where Bond, for all the because for all of this film, this film is beautifully shot. Like,
Oh yeah, it is like Thunderball. It really uses its locations.
hmm.
Thankfully, unlike Thunderball, not all of its locations aren't water.
Yeah,
So it's like you
Japan.
get mountains and you get these like nice chase scenes, and they have I think it's because it was a co-production with Toho, but these scenes like have movement and it feels like you're actually going to locations and not sets, because there's a car chase where it feels like they're going through actual locations and it's not all green screen. And there's, stuff where, they're filming it on location. And I kind of like stuff like this where they're obviously filming at a location, stuff like that. There's a lot of it, like the Little Nelly sequence where Bond has his little plane and he's being traced by a bunch of helicopters, and they fly around the mountains of Japan, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. And they're just establishing shots, and it feels different than a lot of the James Bond movies, because a lot of the James Bond movies are at Pinewood Studios and they're sets, and sometimes they get cramped, sometimes they don't. But you can really tell the James Bond movies that had a lot of sets, and you can really tell the James Bond movies that had to go there. And this is one of the ones where it feels like a real travelogue of Japan, and it feels like you're there, and it is a really nice movie to watch because of that. But like I said with Thunderball, this is a movie I have to be in the mood for because it is kind of relaxed and the plot kind of it's just going from point to point as uh where it doesn't feel like the points really matter that much. Like Bond goes to this British expatriate played by Charles Gray, who has lived in Japan for 17 years. And he is in the movie for 2 minutes, and then he just finds his way out. And then he is killed by the person who is the next plot point. And then there's, all of these. Then James Bond has to James Bond's, amazingly enough, after killing the number 2 person inspector, goes in disguise as, a businessman to a very clear Spectre shell corporation. And nobody recognizes him. I mean, he immediately raises suspicions. And then there's Karen Dorr, who, or Karine, I can't remember how, because she is kind of the, like, trying to be Fiona from Thunderball, but it isn't as good. And, like, a lot of the villains, like Mr. Osato and in the first half of the movie, are just kind of there to fill time, and they don't really do much except be there and kind of be a presence for Bond to work against, because it's like I have a hard time remembering the first hour of this movie for a lot of the times, because it moves from, like, point to point. And, like, I don't think we've even discussed the main plot, which is James Bond fakes his death to give him more leeway to investigate the kidnapping of astronauts in outer space. And there is a mysterious force that is stealing Japanese and American space capsules in order to inflame war. And spoiler, it's Spectre. It's always Spectre. They want the Americans and the Russians to fight and then take what's ever left. So they find the point in Japan, and so this new life that Sean Connery or James Bond gets is supposed to give him the leeway to investigate, even though, like, you would think they would know what James Bond looks like right now. He has foiled, let's see, 3 of their plots already.
He does keep it.
Yeah, Goldfinger was just Goldfinger being Goldfinger. But
and he does announce himself as, like, "Hello, it's me, Bond. Yes, I'm back. Hello, yes."
And it's like, you have, like, record stuff you can record people's footage on. You're a worldwide organization that can distribute things to people. It's like,
they're called video cameras. Buy some Spectre. Oh, look. And also, it's like Bond goes to Japan, like, even at this point in the in sort of the late 60s, like, Japan was, like, not a, you obviously did get expats, and obviously you did have in the post-war period, a decent number of sort of non-Japanese, but, like, you're not going to be looking terribly difficultly for this one guy.
Yeah.
It's like, I think this guy might be Bond.
Yeah. I mean, the plot cover is supposed to be Bond is dead, so it can't be Bond. But who is this person who looks exactly like James Bond and does exactly the things he does? But, the plot is kind of creaky, and that is like the one where it really feels like it is just a string of things to get Bond to the action sequences, which, eventually becomes a problem. It's everything is not do or die. It's what you do with it. And, as a general movie, like, from a filmmaking standpoint, it is fine. It is really beautiful. It looks really good. The action sequences are fun and exciting. And, the plot moves well enough. It's just, it's racist.
Yeah.
sexist. And then they have, James Bond. After they discover who he is, they decide, okay, we're going to disguise him again and make him Japanese. So they give him the worst plastic surgery in the world in prosthetics. And, he talks Japanese in a thick Scottish accent. Arigato gozaimasu.
It's like, yeah. And yet, some of it is like, by the time you get to Blofeld's base, and it's like, okay, Bond, Bond bread and butter. It's Bond facing off against yet another megalomaniacal genius. It's like, okay, this is okay.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
But some of it is
fun. It is a fun movie. It is just there are two sides of it, and if you want to take, the sides, it's a pretty good movie. Cool. If you want to take the side that's racist and sexist, absolutely go for it. It's a lot of problems we're going to have with the James Bond. It is of two things, and it is how white straight guys look at it like me, and it's just like how the rest of the world can see it.
Yeah. What it does have is a damn good score. I think this is like probably of the sort of the early Bonds, this is definitely one of the best ones that is like the music is very good.
Yeah, the music is very good. The theme song with Nancy Sinatra is wonderful. It's like it has those Asian elements, but it doesn't play too hard on it like George Harrison would later do for Shanghai Surprise, where he would there's literally chopsticks on the soundtrack. It wouldn't do that. The elements are played subtly, and it's a very lush, beautiful score by John Barry, and it's like John Barry really gets that the locations need proper music. Like Thunderball, we didn't mention, had a really good score. It's just it's kind of the same melody over. It's like the same underwater melody because a lot of it takes place underwater. And then occasionally you'll get scenes that allow it to be brash and big and like when Felix Leiter tells him, "We're running out of time," and it's like ba-da-da-da. But this one is a little more subtle than that, but it is very my ADHD is making me say those same words again, and I apologize.
Well, the song is bizarrely, there are like a bizarre number of covers for this song, and it gets used as a sample a lot. And it's like David Arnold, who would go on to do a lot of the Bond scores in the 90s, does a version bizarre enough with Bjork, and it's like, okay, that's a thing. And it obviously the opening sort of couple of bars of this are heavily sampled by a number of people. This is it seems really
the spacewalk music that is often used in the space sections of other movies would be.
And by the propeller heads.
The propeller heads version of Honor Majesty's Secret Service has a middle break where, hi police, what's up? I don't know if you heard the sirens in the background, but there's a mid break in Honor Majesty's Secret Service covered by the propeller heads. That is the spacewalk from You Only Live Twice. And then there's another version of the spacewalk produced by David Arnold by the group Left Field and Shaken and Stirred, the David Arnold James Bond project, or the David Arnold 007 project, but which is an interesting CD. I don't know if I'd call it great, but we'll get there when we get to David Arnold.
Yeah. So tomorrow we will be bidding Sean Connery a brief farewell because we'll be meeting up back with him the day after as we turn to George Lazenby's only appearance as James Bond in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. See you tomorrow.